Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso midnight. The presidential palace was quiet, but inside the war room the air was electric. Fluorescent lights flickered over maps of Africa, strategic memos, and satellite images. Lieutenant Colonel Ibrahim Traoré, young, defiant, and bearing a fatigue jacket without insignia, stared at the conference table like it was an enemy he had already conquered. Around him sat his inner circle, hardened military men, political exiles, Pan-African scholars, and revolutionary youth leaders. "We're done being puppets," Traoré thundered. "France wants our gold, America wants our uranium, and the IMF wants our soul." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room, though a few eyes flicked nervously toward Major Doumbia, his senior intelligence officer. "With respect, President," Doumbia said cautiously, "if we reject every Western agreement overnight, we risk economic suffocation. They'll freeze our assets, sanction us. The CFA franc is a chain around our necks." Traoré cut in, his voice iron. "We print money in France, we send raw materials and import finished products. This is not trade, this is colonialism with better PR." He slapped a dossier on the table. Classified intelligence gathered over 6 months operations by French special forces across the Sahel, covert influence campaigns from Brussels, joint drills with neighboring puppet regimes. It was damning. "Operation Koudougou is greenlit," he said flatly. A silence followed, heavy like a sky before the storm. Then, from the far corner of the table, Ama Njai, the Gambian strategist who had defected from ECOWAS, raised her voice. "You want to evict every Western military base in West Africa?" "No," Traoré said, eyes blazing. "I want to liberate West Africa." The next morning, headlines exploded across the continent. Traoré expels French troops, declares end to neocolonialism. Burkina Faso rejects IMF deal, launches West African Gold Reserve Initiative. Ibrahim Traoré calls emergency Pan-African Assembly in Bamako. In Lagos, in Kinshasa, in Dakar, protests erupted in support. Youth marched with banners of Africa Rise, and "We stand with Traoré." Songs filled the air, and Traoré's face, a silhouette against a lion, became an icon. But in Washington, in Paris, in London, war rooms lit up in fury. "We underestimated the boy," muttered CIA Africa Station Chief Martha Raines, sliding a file across to the French DGSC liaison. "He's uniting the Sahel. If this spreads, it'll be another 1958, only this time with smartphones and crypto. We have to break him," the Frenchman replied. "We start with the usual: destabilization, economic pressure, fund the opposition, and if that fails..." Raines didn't finish the sentence. She simply raised her phone and said, "Activate Operation Silk Viper." Meanwhile, Traoré met with President Assimi Goïta of Mali and Captain Ibrahim Sanogo of Guinea in a secret summit far from satellites in the Dogon Cliffs. Goïta leaned forward, voice sharp. "If we form a bloc and back our currencies with gold, we challenge the CFA. We challenge the euro. Are you ready for that storm?" Sanogo nodded. "We've been ready since the first coup. The youth are with us. It's the old guard that'll fight back. We must dismantle them, root and branch." Traoré stared into the fire crackling in the stone hearth. "This isn't about gold or oil. It's about dignity. My people eat dirt while our wealth fuels Paris. That ends now. We make a pact, not with France, not with America, but with each other." They clasped hands in the firelight. At that same moment in Abidjan, President Ouattara, a staunch French ally, was on the phone with President Emmanuel Macron. "This is a cancer," Ouattara said. "Traoré's madness is spreading. The students here chant his name. My ministers whisper rebellion." Macron was blunt. "We'll need a proxy, someone close, someone he trusts. Get to Doumbia." Back in Ouagadougou, Major Doumbia received an encrypted message on a secure line. It was a voice he hadn't heard in years. "General Kouyaté," Doumbia whispered, recognizing the tone. "Once a mentor, now in exile and on the payroll of the West. You followed a boy into fire," Kouyaté said. "You still have time to step out, or we'll both burn." "I serve my country," Doumbia replied coldly. "You serve his ambition," Kouyaté spat. "There's a plan underway. Soon the world will see him as a tyrant and assassin, a man who clings to power like Mugabe or Sankara before him. Help us, or be dragged down when he falls." The line went dead. Doumbia sat still, hands shaking. Across town, in a hidden compound, a group of foreign operatives briefed a Burkina militia leader, Colonel Daira, with maps and drone footage. They handed him money. Weapons, a simple instruction, make the capital bleed. That night, explosions rocked Ouagadougou. A power station was bombed. Radio Burkina went dark. Militias took to the streets, disguised as protesters, firing at police, burning food depots. Traoré emerged at dawn, standing on a rooftop overlooking the chaos. He didn't flinch. They want fear. He told the cameras, but fear is the weapon of the dying. My people do not kneel. We will endure and we will win. His words echoed across African airwaves. But inside his palace, as fire flickered in the horizon, Traoré looked to Doumbia, who betrayed us. Doumbia said nothing. In the smoldering aftermath of the attack, the capital felt like a haunted battlefield. Plumes of black smoke curled into a sky that had forgotten peace. Sirens wailed across Ouagadougou, and radio silence from the national station added to the paranoia. President Ibrahim Traoré stood with clenched fists inside the Situation Room, eyes trained on the digital feed from military drones. Entire districts had fallen under the control of armed militia loyal to Colonel Daira, a man Traoré had once called a brother, in arms. "How many casualties?" he asked coldly. 80. 4 confirmed, sir. Dozens more missing," answered Captain Zarakone, his deputy and former rebel commander from the north. "And Daira. He's taken the west sector, backed by foreign tech, encrypted comms, American night optics, satellite uplink. This wasn't just an insurrection, it was a black op." Traoré's eyes narrowed. "Where's Doumbia?" Captain Cone hesitated. "Gone. His tracker went dark 5 hours ago." The words cut deeper than the shrapnel he had once pulled from his own thigh in a firefight. Doumbia, the man who'd saved his life at the Battle of Djibo, gone. No, vanished, and the silence that meant one thing: betrayal. Zara sealed the airfields, ground all flights. Nobody leaves this country until I say so. Outside the palace, the city reeled with tension. Supporters of Traoré gathered in the Place de la Révolution, defiant in their chants, waving flags of Burkina Faso and homemade placards reading "Africa libre ou morte." Tanks rolled through the streets, not in conquest, but in protection. But inside every armored vehicle, the soldiers' eyes shifted nervously. No one knew who was loyal anymore. In Paris, inside the Élysée Palace, President Emmanuel Macron paced his private office with a glass of wine untouched in his hand. His advisors hovered near a display board lit with real-time intelligence, images of burning trucks, satellite footage of Daira's forces, intercepted calls between Traoré's commanders. Traoré didn't collapse, Macron said bitterly. He consolidated. His intelligence chief, Bernard Latour, gave a slow nod. "We underestimated the people's loyalty to him. They see him as a Sankara reborn, young, incorruptible, dangerous." "And our agent?" Macron asked. "Doumbia is in the wind. Either he's flipped or he's hiding until Daira gains the upper hand." Macron turned to the map. "We can't afford a repeat of Mali. If Burkina falls completely out of our sphere, Niger will follow. Côte d'Ivoire becomes a dam holding back a revolution." Latour hesitated. "There is another option." Macron turned sharply. "Assassination. Assassination." Latour confirmed, but not directly. "Frame it. Make it tribal. Internal. A bullet that looks like it came from the inside. The Americans have assets on the ground who could help. Unofficially." Macron's silence was his consent. Meanwhile, at a secure compound outside Bobo Dioulasso, Major Doumbia paced restlessly. His beard had grown, his uniform replaced with civilian clothes. He hadn't slept in days. Across from him sat Colonel Daira, his eyes cold as stone. "You were supposed to take the palace," Doumbia hissed. "Instead, you've turned this into a war zone. You think this is chess," Daira snapped. "It's chaos. That's how power moves. Traoré was never going to surrender. He's a cult now. I had to make the city bleed. That was the plan. Our plan was to save Burkina Faso from falling into isolationism and economic ruin." Daira laughed darkly. "No, Your plan was to sleep with your conscience. My plan was to win. Doumbia rose. We're losing the people. The youth are with him. The soldiers, even the damned peasants, carry his slogans. You think Paris will protect you when this burns out? Adira's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. You're not walking away from this, Doumbia. You chose a side when you answered that call from France. Silence stretched. Then Doumbia said quietly, then I choose again. He walked out, not looking back, disappearing into the jungle of rebellion, where neither Daira nor the West would find him. In Bamako, the Pan-African Assembly was underway. Flags of Mali, Guinea, and Burkina Faso waved alongside New Blackhand, green standards representing a proposed West African Confederation. Ibrahim Traoré stood at the podium, scars on his face still visible, eyes ringed with exhaustion but blazing with determination. The world says we are children, that we need guidance, that we must choose between Beijing or Washington, between euros or dollars, but I say we choose ourselves. Thunderous applause echoed through the marble chamber. Youth delegates from Senegal, Chad, and Niger cheered. Women in traditional robes ululated. Even some observers from South Africa and Kenya leaned forward with interest. And to those who plot against us, Traoré continued, voice rising, to those who burn our markets and assassinate our journalists, hear me clearly. You may own our past, but you will not touch our future. He stepped down into a whirlwind of reporters, activists, and young politicians eager to shake his hand. But in the shadows above, a man watched with binoculars, no badge, no passport, just a black case in his hand and a quiet nod into an earpiece. Later that night, Traoré returned to Ouagadougou under a shroud of secrecy. His convoy took back roads using drones and signal jammers, but they were too late. The Ministry of Culture, the last remaining neutral building in the capital, had been bombed. Inside had been school children rehearsing a National Day performance. Dead 22, injured 41, he stood in the rubble holding a child's charred notebook in his hands. He didn't cry, he didn't speak, but the rage in his eyes was more powerful than any speech. Zara, he said finally. Call the summit. What summit? The underground leaders from Ghana, Senegal, Uganda. I want a united defense pact, and I want a new intelligence body, no foreign tech, no external funding, built from scratch, and above all, he turned to her. Find Doumbia, alive or dead. I need to know. In a village hidden in the eastern forests, Major Doumbia emerged from a riverbed, soaked and bruised. A child led him into a hut where a rebel commander patched his wounds. He'd spent days escaping Daira's betrayal, hiding from Western drones, drinking from streams. He was a man hunted by all sides, but when he heard the news of the school bombing, something inside him snapped. He stood wincing. Where's the transmitter? The commander handed it to him. Doumbia pressed the code. A few moments later, across frequencies monitored by rebel units, international media, and even the Burkina military, Doumbia's voice rang out. This is Major Malik Doumbia. I speak today not as a traitor, but as a patriot. What I did believing I was protecting my country, but I see now. The only man trying to protect it is Ibrahim Traoré. I was wrong, and I will make it right. The speech went viral in minutes. Across Burkina Faso, the tide shifted. Militias surrendered. Protesters cheered. Youth groups called it the voice of redemption, but in Paris, Bernard Latour smashed his tablet in fury. He just gave Traoré his myth. And Traoré, he heard the broadcast from his makeshift command center. He didn't smile, he just closed his eyes for a moment. Prepare for retaliation. He told Zara, they won't let this stand. The retaliation came quickly. Drones struck 3 Burkina border posts. The West denied involvement. Anonymous sources flooded media channels with forged stories. Traoré was building a nuclear reactor with Iran. Traoré had executed children. Traoré was trafficking weapons. The international press ate it up. Sanctions followed. Burkina Faso's bank accounts were frozen. Fuel imports stopped. Border nations shut their gates, but still the people held on. And then, one night, in a quiet corridor of the presidential safe house, Captain Zara Cohn walked in with grim news. We found the sniper, she said. Traoré raised an eyebrow. Zara continued, an American national, ex-Navy SEAL, hired through 3 shell companies, captured during an operation near Koya. Traoré didn't react. He simply said, "Bring him to me." In a dimly lit room below the palace, the sniper sat chained to a chair. Traoré entered alone, no guards, no weapons, just a chair opposite the man. "You know who I am," Traoré said. The sniper said nothing. "You came to kill me, you bombed a school." Still silence. Traoré leaned forward. "Tell your masters this. I am not Mobutu, I am not Gaddafi. I will not die in exile or on my knees. I will die here in this land with my people if I must, but not yet, not today." He stood up and walked to the door, but before he could leave, the sniper finally spoke. "You're already dead. You just don't know it yet." Traoré paused and then turned slowly. "No," he said, "but you will." The rain fell in slow, deliberate sheets across the capital. The thunder was distant, like a beast growling at the edge of reason. Inside the presidential compound, a war council was in full session. A map of West Africa stretched across the table, its borders marked with fresh ink. Arrows, circles, coded notations that hinted at the silent war happening beneath the surface. President Ibrahim Traoré stood with his sleeves rolled up, boots muddy from a morning inspection at the bomb, Doubt Children's Theater. Captain Zara Cohn sat beside him, flipping through intercepted communiques. Across the room, a handful of foreign diplomats, those who hadn't fled, watched in tense silence. "You mean to tell me," Traoré said slowly, voice laced with steel, "that the African Union has refused to condemn the attempted assassination on a sitting head of state?" The Malian envoy, sweating under the weight of his own words, answered, "They have chosen neutrality, Mr. President, publicly, privately. Many are afraid." Afraid, Traoré turned, staring him down. "Of who? France, NATO, the World Bank?" Zara answered instead, "No, sir, of you." Traoré's eyes didn't blink, his jaw didn't move, but the room chilled. The silence roared louder than the thunder. The South Sudanese minister, a young firebrand named Mwangi, leaned forward. "I'm not afraid, Traoré, but understand this, what you're doing. It's never been done before, not since Sankara, not on this scale. You're not building a country, you're building a rebellion. I'm building an Africa where our children aren't pawns on somebody else's chessboard," Traoré replied. "And if that frightens the old men in Addis Ababa, so be it." Outside, the skies opened up with a flash of lightning, but inside it was something else entirely that sparked. A young intelligence officer burst into the room, face pale as if chased by ghosts. "Mr. President," he gasped, "you need to see this." A video, grainy, shaky, shot from a phone in a muddy alley somewhere in Niamey, Niger. It showed a van clearly marked with Burkina Faso diplomatic tags riddled with bullets. Inside, the lifeless bodies of 3 Burkinabe intelligence officers. At the end of the clip, the camera zoomed in on a paper pinned to one of the corpses with a knife. The note read, "We warned you, get out of Niger, or we finish what we started." A friend from Langley. Gasps went around the room. Traoré said nothing. Captain Zara whispered, "Langley, CIA." "No," Traoré finally replied, "a ghost." He stood up and walked out of the room into the corridor where only the shadows followed. Zara caught up moments later, her boots echoing in rhythm with his. "We have to respond," she said. "The people will demand it." "I know." "Then what's the plan?" Traoré stopped. "The Americans want to corner me. I'll give them a window instead." Zara frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means we go to the lion's den." 3 days later, the world watched in utter disbelief as President Ibrahim Traoré landed in Moscow. Broadcasts across every network, Al Jazeera, CNN, RT, BBC, flashed images of the young African president being greeted on the snowy tarmac by Russian defense officials and economic envoys. No red carpet. No state dinner. Just a handshake with Mikhail Borodin, Putin's new envoy for Africa. Inside a dimly lit Kremlin meeting room, Traoré wasted no time. "I'm not here to be another client," he began. "Burkina Faso doesn't need another master." Borodin smiled. "Yet you came." "I came for leverage. Africa is tired of choosing sides between parasites. We want partners." Borodin leaned forward, voice silky and dangerous. "And what do you offer in return?" "Minerals, loyalty, a foothold." Borodin's eyes lit up. "You're making a devil's bargain," a quiet voice said from the corner. Traoré turned to see a familiar face. Yelena Grashev. a former KGB agent turned advisor on African affairs. "You're here because you're losing," she said plainly. "You think Moscow will protect you from the CIA, from Macron, from Daira, but you're mistaken. They'll all take your hand, and when you fall, they'll erase your name like it was never written." Traoré didn't flinch. "Then I'll write it in blood." Back in Ouagadougou, chaos exploded. Colonel Daira had returned, this time with Turkish weapons and rogue UN peacekeepers who had defected. In less than 48 hours, they had seized 2 airports, the national radio station, and kidnapped Burkina Faso's finance minister. Zahra Cohen coordinated from the underground war room, barking orders into a dozen radios. "Move Battalion Alpha to Sector 4. Do not let them reach the central bank." One of her junior officers looked up, pale. "Ma'am, they've breached the treasury." Zahra slammed her fist on the table. "Where is the president? Still in Moscow." Then another voice crackled through the secure line. "This is Major Doumbia." Everyone in the room froze. Doumbia continued, "I'm in the capital. I've organized a civilian militia. We're holding the line at the university." Zahra grabbed the mic. "You're not cleared. I don't care. I'm not here for orders. I'm here to clean my soul." A moment of silence. Then Zahra replied softly, "Then let's do it together." In the skies over North Africa, President Traoré's plane hurtled back toward the heart of war. Inside the cabin, he clutched a single folder stamped "Confidential Moskva." Inside, weapons manifests, Russian trainers, and intel on French covert operations in West Africa. His aides were quiet, tired, worn, but he was electric with fire. As they descended, Zahra's voice crackled through the cabin's encrypted line. "Mr. President, Daira has called for your resignation on national radio. Says he'll grant you exile in Mali if you surrender tonight. Put him through." Traoré ordered. There was a click, and then Daira's venomous voice. "You're finished, brother. Your people bleed, your streets burn. Walk away with dignity." Traoré answered, "You mistake fire for surrender. You see blood and think the heart is dead. You think you can stop what's coming. I don't need to stop it. I need to survive it just long enough." "Long enough for what?" Traoré smiled into the static. "For the world to see who you are." He hung up. That night, Traoré stepped off the plane and into fire, but it wasn't war he met. It was music. Thousands had gathered at the tarmac, risking sniper fire and drones, holding torches and singing songs from the revolution. Elderly griots with balafons, youth with drums, mothers with their children swaying in rhythm. They weren't armed, they were defiant. As Traoré moved through them, a woman grabbed his hand and whispered, "Don't let them take our future." He nodded and kept walking. At dawn, the final assault began. Zahra's forces pushed from the north. Doumbia's militia attacked from the east. Traoré himself rode in an armored vehicle toward the heart of the city, toward the treasury building Daira had taken as his stronghold. Smoke rose, bullets flew, a child cried in the street. Inside the treasury vault, Daira watched the monitors. "They're coming," whispered his bodyguard. Daira breathed heavily. "Let them." The doors exploded inward. Gunfire erupted, and then silence. Traoré stepped through the smoke. He looked at Daira, no words, just a pistol in his hand. But before he could raise it, Daira dropped his weapon and said, "Then finish it. Let the revolution eat itself." Traoré raised the gun. His finger hesitated, and then he turned. "Arrest him." As soldiers swarmed the building, Zahra reached Traoré, breathless. "It's over." "No," he replied, "it's just begun." She looked confused. Traoré handed her the Moscow folder. Inside this are files, French sabotage programs, American covert ops, proof. Zahra's eyes widened. "What are you going to do with it?" Traoré looked past her toward the rising sun above a wounded city. "I'm going to burn the veil." The morning after Daira's arrest, Ouagadougou was eerily still. Streets that once echoed with bullets and boots were now lined with civilians sweeping rubble and clearing the charred remains of burned barricades. But beneath the silence, the country trembled. The people were not waiting for peace. They were waiting for justice, and they wanted it from the man who had dared the world to look him in the eye. Inside the presidential compound, Traoré sat alone in the war room, no longer surrounded by generals, advisors, or allies, just a thick, trembling silence. The confidential Moscow file lay open before him, each document a dagger. Images of CIA handlers in hotel rooms with rebel leaders, satellite snapshots of French helicopters delivering crates labeled as medical aid, but packed with ammunition, payment logs showing bribes to ECOWAS officials from shadowy accounts in Zurich. He was staring at a report labeled Operation Red Mirage Langley Protocols, West African Subversion Initiatives 2023-2025. Every line, he muttered, is a noose around their necks. Zara entered the room quietly, holding a cup of black tea. They're waiting outside. Press, people, the whole continent. Traoré didn't look up. I should have killed him. He's more valuable alive, she replied. A living traitor can expose other traitors. Traoré finally raised his eyes, and if justice is too slow, then we speed it up. The international press conference was held in a ruined theater, a deliberate choice by Traoré. He stood alone on a scorched stage, flanked not by military men, but by everyday citizens, teachers, farmers, and students whose lives had been shattered by the chaos. Behind him, a giant screen began flashing images and reports from the Moscow file. Each slide was more damning than the last. This is not a rebellion, Traoré began, this is a reckoning. His voice was low, controlled, not a speech, a sentence. He held up a dossier. This is proof, undeniable, recorded, and bloody, that France, the United States, and even the African Union have conspired not just to undermine our sovereignty, but to destabilize an entire continent for profit. Gasps rang through the crowd. He continued, the so-called aid convoys, they were weapons routes, the democracy programs, money, laundering covers, and the peacekeepers, mercenaries with a flag. In Paris, the Élysée Palace scrambled for response. In Washington, analysts at the NSA were already preparing counter-narratives, but it was too late. The footage was live. The documents were already in the hands of Al Jazeera, Le Monde, and China Global Television Network. I do not declare war today, Traoré said calmly, because war has already been declared on us for decades, through sanctions, through debt traps, through puppet leaders and false diplomacy. He looked straight into the camera. To the West, if you want our minerals, you'll pay fair. If you want our land, forget it. And if you want war, he paused, you'll get it. But it won't be fought with guns alone. It will be fought with truth, with fire, with a generation that refuses to kneel. The world went silent. That night, the compound was attacked, not by Daira's remnants, not by rebels, by drones, 2 high-altitude MQ-9 Reapers. Silent, almost invisible, they weren't meant to destroy the palace. They were meant to assassinate Traoré. But someone had tipped him off. Captain Zara had woken him only minutes before impact. Move. The blast shattered half the west wing. Flames licked through the night sky. Fire crews battled the inferno for hours, but the city had already descended into chaos. People poured into the streets, not in fear but in fury. Chants rang through the capital, no more chains, Traoré lives, Africa is awake. Across social media, the hashtags #BlackReckoning and #Ibrahim Lives trended worldwide. And in a fortified bunker beneath the smoldering palace, Traoré met with a shadowy figure only Zara had seen once before, a woman known only as Adama. She was a legend, the ghost of West African resistance. Thought to be dead, but now flesh and breath, she handed Traoré a folder. This is what you've been missing, she said. Inside, satellite data, insider transcripts, and encryption codes revealing the exact origin of the drone strike. Langley, but worse, it had been approved by the African Union Council, the same council that had remained neutral during Daira's coup. Traoré's hands trembled as he read the names. Several were supposed allies. Betrayal ran deeper than the mines in Ouagadougou. 2 days later, Traoré addressed the African Union summit in Addis Ababa. He didn't ask permission. He arrived uninvited, and as he walked into the hall, flanked by Zara and Adama, a hush fell. Several delegates turned their backs. Traoré smiled. Turn around, he said. You'll want to see this. He dropped the Moscow file on the central dais. It landed with a loud thud. I have come not to ask for support, he began. But to expose hypocrisy, gasps, mutters, "Ibrahim, this is not the place," began the Nigerian representative. "It is exactly the place," Traoré thundered. He opened the folder. "Senegal, Ghana, Côte d'Ivoire, each of you has received payments in exchange for silence. Some of you have sold access to your ports, your skies, your people." One by one, he read the names, and the drone strike. That wasn't just a foreign attack. It was authorized right here. Pandemonium erupted. Some delegates fled the chamber, others screamed, but many, especially the youth representatives, stood and applauded. "You want to censure me?" Traoré asked. "Go ahead, pass your resolution, but know this, the people are not behind you, the people are behind me." Back in Burkina Faso, rebellions were spreading, but not the kind the West feared. Students across Togo, Mali, and Chad were storming parliament buildings not to overthrow, but to demand transparency, justice, and new constitutions. A fire had caught, and no one could put it out. Meanwhile, Traoré summoned his remaining cabinet. "We are severing all military ties with France, effective immediately," he declared. Gasps. "And the US? They no longer have diplomatic status here. Their embassy must close within 72 hours. Zara looked at him. "You just declared war." "No," Traoré replied, "they did." Adama stepped forward, placing a small black book on the table. It bore a single word, Ubuntu. "This is the foundation for the new alliance," she said. Pan-African, no borders, no masters. The plan was radical. A new confederation of African states, independent from colonial treaties, international banking systems, and Western oversight. The Ubuntu Pact would be funded by pooled resources, minerals, agriculture, innovation, and protected by a joint defense coalition, and Traoré would be its first steward, but he hesitated. "I never asked to lead a continent." "You didn't," Adama replied. "But you earned it." The twist came as the world celebrated. In the middle of a live interview with Al Jazeera, as Traoré spoke of hope and unity, a journalist received breaking news. She froze mid-question. "Mr. President, I'm sorry, I just received this update." She looked shaken. "There's been an explosion. In Lagos, a bomb targeted the Ubuntu Summit delegates. 77 dead, many from Burkina Faso." Traoré's eyes went cold. Silence, then the camera feed cut to static. Hours later, a video was posted anonymously on dark web channels. It showed a masked figure, speaking in French-accented English. "We warned you, Ibrahim. A free Africa means a dead Africa." Traoré stood before his cabinet that evening. "No more speeches," he said, "no more negotiations." And he turned to Zara, voice like stone. "Activate the final protocol." She hesitated. "You mean?" "Yes." She unlocked a red briefcase, pulled out a single drive, and plugged it into the central terminal. Adama whispered, "Once this starts, there's no going back." Traoré nodded. "I know." He looked out the shattered windows of the war room and said, almost to himself, "If they wanted the old world to live, they should have killed me when they had the chance."